In my career, I never will ever use the phrase something's a deal breaker. And I probably have only heard it once in all the 10 years that I've done this, because nothing is. I think there's always common ground. I think that optimistic value is important. Right off the bat, you want to make it work. Now, of course, there's going to be situations where it's an issue with integrity or things like that, which is very rare. Those are exceptions, but generally it's trust, wanting to partner, understanding the other side. Their success is our success, so it needs to be a win-win for both.
Welcome to Women Leaders on the Move, a Her C-Suite radio podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Benamou, and every week I bring you inspirational stories and valuable insights to help you with the arc of your career and your personal life. I'm also the founder of Her C-Suite, a network community of ambitious women making meaningful contributions and creating an ecosystem of limitless opportunities inside our mastermind programs, as well as our Entrepreneur Connect circles, where entrepreneurs are building their businesses inside our network platform. I invite you to check it all out at hercsuite.com. Speaking of Her C-Suite, I'm so thrilled about today's guest. She is a member of Her C-Suite Mastermind Boards program. Priya Mukhedkar is a Senior Vice President of Consumer Products at Paramount, where she oversees business development, marketing, and licensing partnerships for several consumer product categories with brands like SpongeBob, Paw Patrol, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Star Trek, Yellowstone, and many others. Priya builds strategic alliances with major consumer product brands and has been the driving force behind some of the most iconic collaborations within big media. She's a proven strategic business leader who enjoys building and inspiring teams to maximize business growth. Before being at Paramount, Priya was responsible for business across several categories at the Walt Disney Company, where she worked across consumer product licensing, Disney parks, studios, and she began her career at General Mills. We talk about all the ways that her background led to her successful business transactions and relationships, and I know that you are going to really find all the details that she shares today helpful for your career. So let's get started now. Priya, I'm so excited to welcome you to Women Leaders on the Move today. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. Thanks, Natalie.
Me too. I am excited because we met through a mutual connection, Marlo Lyons. So shout out to Marlo. And also, I love the ecosystem because I met Marlo through another person, Leslie Marbon. So it's like the ecosystem keeps continuing and it's so beautiful. So I'm so glad that we're here together today.
Awesome. Yeah, what do they say? Like degrees of separation, right? That's just reinforced here again.
Absolutely. And today we're going to be talking about people and also the arc of all the things that you're doing, which is so fascinating. But before we get to that, I always like to ask a little bit about you. So our listeners, I've had the benefit of knowing some things about you, but our listeners may not. So share a little bit about your interesting background and the career that you've had up to this point.
Great. Yeah. So I am in consumer products. So currently I'm at Paramount. I manage a large part of their consumer products licensing business, which involves business development and partnerships. We have great brands, as you know, Paw Patrol, SpongeBob, Turtles, soon to launch a lot of Dora items, Yellowstone. So in the last 10 years, I've been in media. Prior to this, I was at Disney and I was actually recruited by the head of consumer products at Paramount to join Paramount. Did the same thing at Disney and worked on some of their brands like Star Wars and Marvel, had to build those businesses once they acquired Lucas and Marvel within certain categories in consumer products. And before that, I was actually part of a manufacturer at General Mills, did various different things there. Loved my experience at General Mills. Business school before that was in retail. I started my career actually at Staples when I was in the US. And I noticed a lot of the great leaders had sort of an MBA background that made them a little bit more effective and the opportunities that they had. And so I thought I wanted to sort of also look into that. There was a book called The Vault Guide to Brand Management. And I was just skimming through that book in terms of what does it take to manage a brand. You have P&L responsibility, you touch different aspects of whatever that brand is. You work with finance, you work with R&D, sales. And I love that cross-functional interaction. And basically, they're training you to be a general manager. Long story, but always been in consumer products. Knew nothing about it when I moved to the US, but now have touched various aspects of it, from being in manufacturing to being in retail to being in media where it's a lot of business development. So that's my career in not so much of a nutshell, but
And you've lived all in many places, both here in the US, but also outside of the US. What were some of those experiences like while you were doing the things that you were doing? And you mentioned, some of the work that you've been doing, both growing up and then also in the work that you've been doing.
people will ask you, Priya, where are you from? And I know what the intention of the question is. And it's very hard for me to answer that question. And I think it is for most immigrants, but specifically for me. And now I've been in the US a long time. I don't want to date myself, but I've lived in 4 different countries, 7 different states in the US, and I've traveled extensively. A lot of that actually started with my dad was in the Indian Air Force. And so we moved every 2 years, and it was so exciting. I loved it, having to sort of build connections and be part of a new network since I was little. And I love that. I love the exploring and discovering new things. So and then I left India as a young woman. I was recruited, and actually very few people know this about me. I was recruited by Cathay Pacific Airways. I had to relocate to Hong Kong. I was working as a flight attendant, and phenomenal experience. This was way back when, and when it was actually fun to do that job, and you got paid well, and I traveled a lot. And while I was actually doing that job, I also wanted to learn to be a pilot. My dad was a pilot, so did that. Didn't know anything about flying other than my dad knows. But then decided to move to the US to finish my undergrad, and lived in the Middle East when I was little as well. My dad was transferred there, so that has been my journey.
And living in all these different places and being adaptable, because I think that's one of the things that we learn when we're not always in the same place, is that you adapt to cultures and you adapt to your environment. How has that helped you on the leadership side of things? Because I know you're very passionate about empathy and kindness and wonderful ways of leading. Did that experience of living in different places impact how you approach leadership?
Right. A great question, Natalie. And yeah, absolutely. Right. And empathy is the ability to see things from a different perspective, whether or not you agree, whether or not you've had the same situation or you've been in the same situation as the other person. I think because of my experiences and the amount of traveled and lived in different countries, when I lived in Hong Kong, I mean, I literally used to walk around with a little notebook and a pencil because people didn't speak English. I didn't speak Cantonese, and I would sketch things out. And it was actually really easy to communicate. You don't have to speak the language, but there's ways you can do it. And I found my way. It absolutely does. It makes you so much more open-minded, so much more understanding. You're not afraid to try different things. And all of that is needed in business, right? It's about creating environment for your team to help them succeed. That's my job. I want them to realize what they can achieve. They may not realize that, but that's sort of my goal, moving the business forward, not being afraid to fail, having courage. All of that is important in leadership.
And one of the things that you're doing now with your licensing is that you're giving opportunities, which I think is so incredible, to smaller companies that may not otherwise have the ability to do some of the things that you're doing with the licensing, and believing in them. And does that kind of translate a little bit from your background into being more open-minded? You said not being afraid
Yeah.
to fail, but also recognizing these smaller entities and giving them that opportunity. And you'd shared with me one story recently about that. And so I would love to know more about, how do you recognize a company? We have listeners, we have entrepreneurs that listen, and they might be thinking about, well, how do I even go about that? And would anyone even consider me for licensing or other things? So what were some of the things that you've learned to recognize in companies because of your ability to be empathetic and seeing maybe differently than others?
We work with a lot of big Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies, but with business development, you're constantly assessing different categories and where can we play? What categories lend themselves to licensing? Whether or not we've ever tried it before doesn't stop me. So I go to a lot of conventions, talk to a lot of people. We're constantly looking at trends. And I'm really passionate about getting behind people who are passionate about a product. A good friend of mine started a makeup company. He wanted to start direct to consumer beauty company and said to me, Priya, I'd love some sort of a collaboration. What should we do? And the idea we had was to launch something with SpongeBob. Now, if you look at what has happened in the beauty space, how it's transformed and changed, and it's so much about social selling and Gen Z and influencer based, it fits well with the SpongeBob brand in terms of SpongeBob is about optimism and one of the most memed characters, very digitally native consumers like SpongeBob, specifically the Gen Z consumer. So it kind of made sense to do that. We launched a collection and it sold out. In fact, we did another round of SpongeBob inspired makeup. And actually, what happened with that is one of the best things that can happen, which is Wet and Wild saw that and worked with Walmart to see if we should do something at all Walmart stores. So it was like an idea that had never been done before. Decided to just try it, and it succeeded, and it got the interest of other manufacturers. And that is what I'm really passionate about. Doing things that someone hasn't really thought about, giving it a try, working with small companies. Their success is our success if they want to use our brands to sort of expand distribution. So it's a win-win. That's what's exciting about sort of my role. And we're constantly finding there's just so many different categories in terms of where to play, what categories to partner with.
I think you mentioned Yellowstone has this cowboy soup. Am I
Yeah.
remembering this right?
So, great example, right? So that was the other thing. Yellowstone is such a phenomenon. People love that show. It's almost sort of a lifestyle brand. And we said, hey, let's find a manufacturer who can potentially test the food category and other categories, within CPG. We found a great company called Food Story Brand, and they work with other manufacturers. And we tested this. Walmart was very keen on the idea because a lot of these other categories had succeeded at Walmart, so the buyers knew about it. Yeah, we're now within a year and a half in 10 different categories with 40 SKUs, 75 different retail channels of distribution, and it's doing really well. And now we're doing working with other manufacturers in that space, really building out that lifestyle brand. And the food, yeah, we call it comfort food, like cowboy cuisine. And within licensing, it tends to be more of a preschool kid focused business. You rarely see success to this extent with an adult, what we call an adult IP like Yellowstone. It's fun working on it.
I think as adults, and I can speak personally because there are things that I'm a super fan of. Captain Marvel, if people know this about me, and Wonder Woman, those are my sheroes. But I think as adults, it makes it fun to feel like you're part of something when you're buying that product. So I think about SpongeBob, and because it was an adult focused, right? It wasn't necessarily for
Right.
children, the Wet and Wild, but you feel like you're part of this. You can have that kid side to you, but also it's
Absolutely.
so fun, right?
Yeah. And this is what we say at Paramount. We create culture and conversation. So a lot of pop culture starts from the things that we do from a content standpoint, and then how do you extend that into product? And yeah, absolutely. And being part of that, I'll give you a really funny story. So yesterday, last minute, some friends of ours, hey, let's do something for July 4th. And I don't know if you know this trend on TikTok. It's this girl sings a song looking for a man in finance, and then she lists out these attributes about what she wants. There's three different things. I'm not gonna mention them here. And the way music has evolved, this little video she did became a viral hit. One of the record companies saw that, turned it into a song, and now you can find them in DJ pool sites. Like I told you, I'm like dabbling in digital DJing. It's my self-care. I'm like teaching myself that. So my friend invited me to join this July 4th little get together. I'm like, I'll only come if you will allow me to subject you to my novice sort of DJing skills. And so I played that song and everyone loved it because they know about that trend and they were shocked to know that there's actually now a song that came out of it. But again, to your point, being part of something that the way things have evolved with digital media and social is how you think about brands is also changing. This little video that this girl did just went viral, and there's all these other offshoots of people adapting that style. It's just very interesting.
I think one of the things that people hearing that story, but I want to expand a little bit because for people that might not have necessarily picked up on the details of it, you are doing DJing and teaching yourself, which I think is so fun. So how did you decide to do that out of all the things, all the creative things? What made you land on that to try?
So I love music and I have very eclectic taste. My dad would play music all the time. Simon and Garfunkel and Fleetwood Mac warms my heart because I grew up listening to that stuff. I love music. I go to a lot of music festivals and it's my sort of self-care. And during COVID, I'd heard the DJing sort of industry has changed because now it's more digital and then you're not actually physically using turntables. And so I just downloaded a software, free software, and started playing around with it. I thought it was interesting. And I have a lot of music. So that's when it started, but then didn't do anything for 2 years. And then last year, actually, I was really busy with work. I had to be very productive with my time. They say you're most productive actually when you're super busy. And so I was very mindful of carving out time on the weekend on Friday. And I taught myself just how to do it. Watched YouTube videos, followed TikTok influencers who are digital, who do DJing. Any opportunity I got, like to talk to a DJ, whether at a store or now you have them at restaurants, ask them questions about what DJ pool sites they use, where do they get their music from, if they'd be willing to talk to me if I had questions. So I kind of immersed myself in it, and I found that I was enjoying it. So I'm still very much in the learning mode, but it's been fun. It looks more intimidating than it is, but it's actually not that hard.
Do you have, you mentioned Fleetwood Mac and Simon and Garfunkel, but I imagine you have dance tunes too, which we've
Oh,
talked
yes.
about because we're
Yeah.
like, we're going to do a dance party for her
Yeah.
C-suite members, which would be really fun. But do you have like in the dance party genre, some of your favorites?
So the best way to learn is learning through what they call house music. And so, there's within that, there's different genres. I like something called Amapiano or Afro beats, deep house. So I have a lot of music. There are these sites where you can download, you pay for it. There's subscription sites also. And I'm getting adventures where I'm also now mixing it with hip hop and rap, but I always have to like ask people, are you okay with, because this is the clean version as well. So so you have to ask your inviting you to play. But those are sort of the genres for DJing. I personally like more alternative and indie, but yes, you have to be open to a lot of genres, and it's mostly house, amapiano, Afrobeats.
So fun and interesting to have this dimension to you. And I'm going to round it out because now we've talked about your career, we've talked about fun things that you're doing as a project, but you also are passionate about boards and getting on boards and the things that you can add to a board and your experience from being in the space that you are and ways that you can add value. So what are some of the things that you've learned in your leadership roles that really translate to whether it's M&A or all those contracts that you're working, the contracts and relationships? What are some of those things that you've really developed that are so helpful as an advisor or a board director?
Have really good understanding of the consumer products business from the different aspects of having worked with a manufacturer, retail. So I've seen it from different sides. So I think I bring that sort of knowledge base. I've built a lot of relationships. There's a category you want more information on. I know somebody in pretty much any consumer products category. The other thing is also getting things done. Getting things done requires strong leadership and managing teams in a way that makes them successful, being a courageous leader, trying different new things. I read this quote by Ernest Hemingway. I think it's like courage is grace under pressure. I just love that saying. And it's not the absence of fear, but how you conduct yourself when you're faced with a situation that causes you fear. And I think good leaders do that very masterfully. I think having empathy helps, vulnerability, and being on boards is all about guiding and advising versus doing. I think I bring a lot of that skill set from everything that I've done and the experiences I've had. And I'm still learning. I mean, you guys have been phenomenal just in terms of what happens in that space and the different types of skill sets and what boards are looking for. So it's been great being part of this group that you're leading, that you started as a CEO.
Well, I'm so glad to have you in our community. And I know that our members are able to connect with you anytime. But if people that are listening to this podcast want to know more about you, where's the best place they can go to find you and connect?
I think the best place would be LinkedIn, and I'm very responsive. It's interesting. I've had this conversation with a couple people. They don't connect with people if they don't know them. I think I'm a little bit more democratic about that. I'm happy to connect with people and talk to them. Somebody in India reached out to me. He wants me to look at his resume. I've never worked in India. I don't know the landscape, but it's business is business. If you understand the basic sort of principles, I think it's not that hard. And I'm happy to look at his resume and give him guidance. So, sorry, long answer, but yeah, LinkedIn would probably be the best.
Priya, thank you so much for being on the show today. I'm so glad we had this conversation together.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. I hope that if you found this information inspirational and you're looking to land a board role, you will visit our Her C-Suite Mastermind boards, because we are helping women land their next board role with our retreats that help accelerate the opportunity to interview for board roles, as well as our monthly mastermind. Visit us at hercsuite.com and check it all out. And if you found this interview helpful and inspirational, I would be so honored if you would rate and review it on your favorite podcast platform. Keep shining your light bright. The world needs you.